I started my own business at 18, paid off debts I never created, and bought a house with cash. I thought I had escaped. But 3 weeks later, a process server handed me a lawsuit from my parents. They claimed I stole the future meant for my sister, a future I was told I could never have. What would you do if your family dragged you to court to profit from the life they tried to destroy? My name is Daniela Jacobs. I grew up in a middling suburb on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio, the kind of place where the houses were stamped out like cookies on a baking sheet, all beige vinyl siding and asphalt driveways. From the street, our lawn looked just as manicured as the neighbors, the grass cut to a precise 2 inches, the hydrangeas by the porch blooming in aggressive shades of blue. It was the picture of the American quiet life, but if you have lived in these neighborhoods long enough, you know that the uniform exteriors are just a shell. Inside every identical box is a unique brand of chaos. In the Jacobs household, the chaos was organized around a single, gravitational truth. It was an unspoken law that governed everything from what we ate for dinner to whose parent-teacher conferences actually mattered. The truth was this: our family only had enough emotional currency and financial bandwidth to support one dream, and that dream did not belong to me. The star of the show was my sister, Lily. She was 3 years younger than me, born with a head of ringlets and a smile that my mother swore could sell toothpaste to the English. I do not remember a time when Lily was just a child. In our house, she was always a project, an investment, a lottery ticket that my parents were furiously scratching away at, hoping for the jackpot that would validate their own mediocre lives. My father, Daniel Jacobs, was a plumber. I can still smell him if I close my eyes. A thick, cloying scent of industrial pipe glue, stale sweat, and that metallic tang of old copper. He would come home every evening around 6, his work boots leaving heavy, muddy indentations on the rug by the door. He wore his exhaustion like a badge of honor, but it was a heavy, resentful thing. He would sink into his recliner, grease still under his fingernails, and look at us with eyes that felt less like a father's and more like a creditor's. "I feed you," he would mutter, taking a long pull from a cheap beer. "I keep the lights on. You owe me. You all owe me for the rest of your lives. Remember that." He viewed fatherhood as a transaction. He was putting coins in a machine, and he expected a payout. My mother, Karen, was the marketing department. She worked the front desk at a local dental office, a job she treated as merely a funding source for her true vocation, managing the brand of our family. She was obsessed with the aesthetic of perfection. We were the family that wore color-coordinated sweaters for the Christmas card. We were the family where everyone smiled with their teeth. But mostly, she was obsessed with Lily. Lily was the jewel. I was the velvet box she sat in. While I was doing homework at the kitchen table, Lily was being shuttled to dance class, then acting workshops, then summer art camps that cost more than my father made in 2 weeks. My mother's phone was always out, recording. She curated Lily's life on Instagram and Facebook with a fervor that bordered on religious. She would post a photo of Lily in a tutu, looking off into the middle distance, and write captions about destiny and born to shine, paragraphs of flowery prose that Lily had never read, let alone spoken. I, on the other hand, was the convenient child. I was the child who made sense. I did not have a spark, according to them. What I had was an obsession with order. I loved lists. I found comfort in the rigid structure of a spreadsheet. The world felt messy and unpredictable, especially with a father who radiated silent rage and a mother who lived in a fantasy land. So I controlled what I could. When I was 9 years old, I found my mother's appointment book for the dental clinic on the kitchen counter. It was a mess of scribbles and whiteout, without asking. I spent 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon color-coding it, reorganizing the slots to minimize gaps between patients. When she saw it, she didn't thank me. She just blinked, surprised that the background noise of her life had suddenly become efficient. By the time I was 11, I was effectively the household operations manager. I knew when the bills were due. I knew how to stretch the grocery budget by buying generic brands so there was enough money left over for Lily's tap shoes. I did the laundry, separating the delicate costumes from my father's oil-stained work clothes. I packed the lunches. I made sure the permission slips were signed. I was working a full-time job for $0 an hour. I remember asking my mother once, just once, why Lily did not have to unload the dishwasher. It was a Tuesday. I was scraping lasagna off a plate, and Lily was in the living room practicing a monologue for a local theater audition. "Mom," I said, the water running over my hands. "Lily is sitting right there. Can't she dry?" My mother did not even look up from her phone. She was editing a photo of Lily, adjusting the brightness to make her skin look porcelain. "Daniela, look at me," she said, her voice dropping to that serious, instructional tone she used when explaining why we couldn't afford vacations. "You are the sister. You are the older one. Your job is to facilitate. Lily needs to focus. Her mind needs to be clear for her art." "But that's not fair," I protested. "Fair?" She laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Daniela, honey, life is not fair. Not everyone gets to be the protagonist. Some people have a big future, a massive destiny. Those people get priority. You? You are solid. You are reliable. Your job is to let her shine. If you do your job right, we all win." It was a philosophy they drilled into me until I almost believed it was biological fact. My father would say it over dinner, pointing his fork at me. "Lily has the gift. Daniela, she is going to be famous. She is going to get us out of this rut. You? You are practical. You will make a fine office worker someday. You stay in the background where it is safe." My mother would echo him while pinning Lily's hair up. "This family only has room for one star. If we try to make you both shine, nobody shines. You keep things stable. That is your role. Be the anchor." I did not hate Lily, at least, not back then. It is hard to hate someone for being spoiled when they have been told since birth that the sun rises specifically to light their face. Lily was not malicious. She was just oblivious. She inhaled the attention because she thought it was oxygen. She assumed that clean laundry just appeared in her drawers and that dinner just materialized on the table. She never saw the machinery working behind the curtains because I was the machinery. But there were moments when the resentment would crystallize in my chest, hard and cold. I remember my 16th birthday. My mother bought a box of cupcakes from the grocery store, the kind with the waxy, neon frosting that sticks to the roof of your mouth. She threw the plastic container on the counter and said, "Happy birthday, Daniela. Grab one before your dad gets home." 3 months later, for Lily's 13th birthday, the official teenage debut, my parents commissioned a custom 3-tiered cake from a boutique bakery downtown. It was covered in fondant stars and edible gold dust. It cost $200. I knew the price because I was the one who balanced the checkbook and saw the withdrawal. I stood there in the kitchen, looking at that golden cake, and then I thought about my plastic container of cupcakes. I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't a hot, screaming anger. It was something quieter. It was the realization that they were never going to see me. No matter how hard I worked, no matter how much money I saved them, I was just part of the furniture. That night, the contrast between the stage and the backstage was so sharp it could cut skin. I sat in the living room, surrounded by the debris of Lily's ambition. There were sequined dance costumes draped over the sofa, scripts scattered on the coffee table, and a half-open makeup kit spilling glitter onto the rug. I pushed a pile of tulle aside to make room for my notebook. I was 17, and I was running the monthly budget, trying to figure out how we were going to pay the electric bill, which was higher than usual because of the stage lights my dad had set up in the garage for Lily's rehearsals. Through the front window, I could see them in the front yard. It was dusk. The lighting was perfect, or so my mother said. They were filming a TikTok. Lily was dancing, doing some viral choreography that involved a lot of arm waving and hip shaking. She looked radiant, I suppose, if you like that sort of manufactured joy. My father was holding the ring light, adjusting the height with a grunt of effort, sweating in the cool evening air. My mother was holding the phone, shouting directions like a director on a Hollywood set. "Smile bigger. Lily, chin up. Show them you own the world." I looked down at my notebook. I looked at the column of expenses, the red numbers that I was trying to turn black. I looked at the chaotic mess of the living room that I would have to clean up once they were done being famous for the neighbors. They were out there performing for an imaginary audience, chasing likes from strangers. I was in here, keeping the roof over their heads. I picked up my pen and wrote down the total for the month. I realized then that my mother was right about one thing. I was good at keeping things stable. I was good at managing operations. But she was wrong about who I was doing it for. I watched them through the glass, silent, animated figures in a pantomime of success. You want me to be the background? I thought, pressing the pen into the paper until the tip almost snapped. Fine, I will be the best damn background you have ever seen. But one day, I am going to walk off this set, and the whole production is going to collapse without me. I turned the page and started a new list. This one wasn't for the family. This one was for me. High school was the first place where I realized that my last name did not have to define my first name. To my teachers, I was not Lily Jacobs' less shiny older sister. I was just Daniela. And in the chaotic ecosystem of a public high school, where paperwork frequently vanished and student clubs were run with the efficiency of a spilled box of marbles, I discovered something dangerous. I discovered that I was valuable. It started in my junior year with Mrs. Ramirez. She taught economics and introduction to business, a woman with sharp eyes and hair cut in a severe bob that brooked no nonsense. She was the faculty advisor for the Future Business Leaders Club, which, ironically, was the most disorganized group on campus. They had missed 3 registration deadlines in a row, and their fundraising money was being kept in a shoebox that nobody could find. One afternoon, I stayed late to ask a question about supply and demand curves. I saw Mrs. Ramirez rubbing her temples, staring at a pile of crumpled sign-up sheets. "It is a mess," she muttered, mostly to herself. "I can fix it," I said. The words came out before I could stop them. She looked at me, really looked at me, over the rim of her glasses. "You think so?" "Give me the box and the passwords," I said. For the next week, I did not just organize the club, I overhauled it. I took the crumpled lists and digitized them. I set up a shared calendar that sent automatic reminders to students' phones 24 hours before a meeting. I created a spreadsheet for the finances that tracked every penny in and out, color-coded by event. I even color-coded the snacks. When I showed Mrs. Ramirez the new dashboard a week later, she did not say anything for a full minute. She just scrolled through the rows and columns, clicking on the tabs I had created. "This is not just tidy, Daniela," she said, her voice quiet. "This is a system." Within a month, attendance at the club meetings did not just improve, it doubled. Students actually showed up because they finally knew when and where to go. We raised $500 in a single bake sale because I had analyzed which periods had the highest foot traffic and positioned our table accordingly. I felt a rush I had never experienced before. It was better than the sugar rush from a cupcake. It was the thrill of efficacy. I realized that chaos was just a puzzle, and I was the only one holding the picture on the box. My reputation spread to the guidance counselor's office. They were struggling to track student volunteer hours for graduation requirements. The software the district had purchased was glitchy and slow, and half the seniors were panicking that their hours had not been recorded. I spent 3 lunch periods building a workaround. I created a simple submission form that fed into a master sheet, using formulas to automatically sum the totals and flag anyone who was falling behind. When I demonstrated it to the head counselor, a harried man named Mr. Henderson, he looked at me like I had just performed a magic trick. "You did this?" he asked, clicking the mouse. "You built this?" "It is just logic," I said, shrugging. "It is just putting things where they belong." Mrs. Ramirez pulled me aside after class the next day. The hallway was crowded with students rushing to lockers, the air thick with the smell of floor wax and body spray. But everything went silent when she spoke. "Daniela, look at me," she said. "You think like an owner. Most people are employees. They wait to be told what to do. You see a broken process and you rebuild it. Do you know that people get paid to do what you are doing for free?" "Paid?" I asked. "For making lists?" For operations, she corrected. For clarity. The world is full of people with big ideas who cannot tie their own shoes. They need people like you to build the road they walk on. I rode the bus home that afternoon with my heart hammering against my ribs. People get paid for this. The sentence replayed in my mind like a favorite song. I was not just the convenient child or the background sister. I had a skill set that had a market value. I walked into the house bursting with the need to share this. I wanted, just for once, to be the one with the good news. Mom was at the kitchen table, the blue light of her laptop illuminating her face. She was editing a video of Lily's recent tap recital, syncing the music to the video with intense concentration. "Mom," I said, dropping my backpack. "Mrs. Ramirez told me today that I have a mind for business. She said the system I built for the school is professional grade. She said I could make a career out of operations." My mother did not look away from the screen. She tapped the spacebar to pause the video. Lily's frozen image, mid-spin, hovered on the monitor. "That is nice. Daniela," she said, her voice flat. "Can you check if the dryer is done? Lily needs her leotard for tomorrow." "No, Mom, listen," I pressed, stepping closer. "She said people pay for this. I increased the club membership by 100%. The guidance counselor is using my software." My mother finally turned her head. Her expression was not proud. It was tired. "Daniela, stop," she said. "Do not get delusions of grandeur. We all know where the talent in this family lies. We have placed our bets on Lily. Your father and I are working ourselves to the bone to give her a shot. We do not have the energy to chase two dreams. You support her. That is enough." My father walked in then, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. He heard the tail end of the conversation. "Your mother is right," he grunted, opening the fridge. "College is expensive. Big schools, big degrees. Those are for kids who have a chance to change their stars. Like your sister. You are solid. You go to community college, get a certificate, work in a nice quiet office. That is a good life for someone like you." The hope in my chest deflated, leaving a hollow ache. It was not just that they did not believe in me, it was that they actively needed me to be small so that Lily could look bigger by comparison. The final blow came in the spring of my senior year. The mail arrived with 2 envelopes for me. One was an acceptance letter to a state university 2 hours away. It was not Harvard, but it was a good school, and I had qualified for a partial academic scholarship. The other was a brochure for Franklin Valley College, the local community college 10 minutes down the road. I put the acceptance letter on the dinner table. I wanted them to see it. I wanted them to see me. My parents sat me down that evening. The atmosphere was heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. "We need to talk about finances." My father said. He did not look at me. He looked at a spot on the tablecloth. "We are so proud that you got into state," my mother added, though her eyes were empty of pride. "But we have been looking at the numbers. Lily has been accepted into that summer-intensive acting program in New York City. The tuition is $4,000. Housing is another $3,000, plus flights and living expenses." I felt the cold creeping up my arms. "We are taking everything out of savings," my father said. "We are tapping the emergency fund. We are betting the farm on this. Daniela, this is her break." "So," I whispered, "what about me?" "You have Franklin Valley," my mother said, gesturing to the brochure I had ignored. "It is a fine school. You can live here. You do not have to pay for a dorm. You can get a part-time job and help out with the bills. We need you here. Daniela, we cannot afford to have you gone." I looked at them. I looked at the parents who had raised me, the people who were supposed to be my safety net. They were looking at me not as a daughter, but as a resource to be managed, a cost to be cut. I could have screamed. I could have thrown the acceptance letter in their faces and told them about Mrs. Ramirez and the guidance counselor and the 50 students in the business club who knew my name, but I knew it would be like shouting at a brick wall. They had already written the script, and in their version of the story, I did not get a monologue. I swallowed the lump in my throat. It tasted like ash. "Okay," I said. My voice was steady. terrifyingly steady. I will go to Franklin Valley. Good girl, my father said, relieved. He patted my hand, his palm rough and callous. You are doing the right thing for the family. But as I sat there, listening to them pivot immediately to discussing Lily's packing list for New York, a switch flipped in the dark control room of my mind. I realized that waiting for them to invest in me was a losing strategy. It was bad business. If I was the only one who saw my value, then I had to be the one to capitalize on it. They wanted me to be the background? Fine. I would learn how to own the background. I would learn how to run the show from the shadows until I had enough leverage to step into the light on my own terms. I registered for classes at Franklin Valley the next day. I chose courses in accounting, business management, and information systems. I did not choose them because they were easy. I chose them because they were tools. I started looking for work immediately. I did not want just pocket money. I wanted capital. That evening, I rode my bike home from a career counseling session at the community college. It was late November, and the Ohio wind was cutting through my thin jacket like a knife. My hands were numb on the handlebars, and my ears were stinging. The suburban streetlights flickered overhead, casting long, distorted shadows on the pavement. I pedaled harder, pushing against the wind, pushing against the gravity of my house. You think like an owner. Mrs. Ramirez's voice echoed in the cold air. People pay for this. My parents thought they had buried me. They thought they had planted me in the local soil to keep me stagnant, to keep me as the roots that held their precious flower in place. But they forgot that roots are the strongest part of the plant. They forgot that when you bury a seed, it grows. I turned onto my street, seeing the light of my house in the distance, the house where Lily was the star and I was the stagehand. Let them have the spotlight, I thought, the rhythm of my pedaling matching the beat of my new resolve. I am going to own the theater. My sanctuary from the suffocating expectations of my parents' house was a place that smelled permanently of lemongrass, acetone, and impending doom. I landed a job as the receptionist at Everhaven Wellness Spa, a storefront operation sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a vape king in a strip mall 3 miles from campus. Calling it a spa was generous. It was a high-traffic, high-stress beauty pit stop run by 2 fierce immigrant women, Maria and Elena, who worked harder than anyone I had ever met and slept less than vampires. They were brilliant at facials and deep tissue massages, but they managed their business with a level of chaos that would make a feral cat colony look organized. The system was a spiral-bound notebook that looked like it had survived a war zone. It was stained with coffee rings and massage oil. Appointments were scribbled in pencil, then overwritten in pen, then crossed out with markers. Sticky notes were plastered all over the computer monitor like yellow shingles, bearing cryptic messages like Sarah 2 p.m. 2s or no heavy cream for Mrs. P. But the real killer was the digital fragmentation. Maria took appointments via text message on her personal phone. Elena took them via Instagram DMs. The landline rang constantly, and nobody, absolutely nobody, synced anything. I was the human firewall. My job was to stand behind the counter and smile while trying to decipher whether Jen at 4 o'clock meant Jennifer H. for a wax or Jennifer L. for a pedicure, or if it was just a note Maria wrote to herself to buy gin. The breaking point arrived on a humid Saturday morning in October. The lobby was already crowded. I was juggling 2 phone lines when the door chimed. 3 women walked in within 30 seconds of each other. They did not look like they were there to relax. They looked like they were there to conquer. "I am here for my 10 o'clock microdermabrasion," the first woman said, tapping a manicured nail on the counter. I looked at the book. I looked at the sticky notes. I looked at the void. Actually, the second woman interrupted, holding up her phone. "I have a DM right here from Elena confirming me for 10 o'clock. "Excuse me," the third woman barked. "I called last Tuesday. I spoke to a woman with an accent. She said 10 o'clock. The air in the small lobby instantly grew hot. I could feel the sweat prickling under my polyester uniform. I looked toward the back, hoping for backup, but Maria and Elena were both mid-treatment with other clients. They poked their heads out from behind the velvet curtains, their eyes wide with panic. They looked at me with a mix of desperation and accusation, as if I had personally invented the concept of time just to spite them. "Fix it," Elena mouthed silently, making a slashing motion across her throat before ducking back in. I spent the next 20 minutes performing a diplomatic miracle that involved discounting services, handing out free product samples, and promising slots that I was physically praying would open up. By the time the lobby cleared, I felt like I had gone 12 rounds in a boxing ring. After the shop closed, Maria and Elena sat in the pedicure chairs, soaking their swollen feet. The silence was heavy. They looked defeated. "This keeps happening." Maria sighed, rubbing her temples. "We lose money. We lose face. Maybe we are too old for this." I was sweeping up hair near the entrance. I paused, leaning on the broom. The logical part of my brain, the part that had color-coded the high school business club, was vibrating. "Let me try to fix it," I said. Elena laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Fix what? Chica? The world?" "The booking system." I said, "Let me take the book home. Let me see the Instagram logins. Let me see the texts. I can build something better." Elena looked at the tattered notebook on the counter. "You think you can fix that nightmare?" "It is already broken," I pointed out gently. "It cannot get worse." Maria looked at Elena, then shrugged. She gave me the notebook. "Go ahead. If you fix it, I buy you lunch. If you lose it, you are fired." I took the chaos home in my backpack. That night, my bedroom was a bunker. Lily was out at a cast party, and my parents were asleep, dreaming of her impending fame. I sat at my small desk, opened my laptop, a clunky refurbished machine with a fan that sounded like a jet engine preparing for takeoff, and spread the debris of Everhaven Spa across my bed. I took photos of every page of the notebook. I transcribed every sticky note. I scrolled through months of Instagram messages, cross-referencing them with the text logs Maria had forwarded to me. I did not have money for fancy salon software. The subscriptions were $40 or $50 a month, and I knew Maria would never pay that, so I built my own. I used Google Calendar as the backbone. I created a separate calendar for each employee and color-coded them. Blue for Maria, green for Elena, yellow for the nail technician who came in on weekends. I set up a free Google form for intake, which fed directly into a spreadsheet that acted as a client database. No more guessing if Jen was allergic to latex. It was right there in the row next to her name. Then I found a dirt-cheap SMS integration tool. It cost pennies per message. I set it up to send an automatic text reminder 24 hours before an appointment. "Hi, this is Everhaven. Confirming your relaxation time tomorrow at 2. Reply yes to confirm." It was simple. It was unglamorous. It was glued together with free tools and determination. But when I ran the test simulation at 3 in the morning, it worked. The flow was logical. The data had a home. I brought the laptop to work on Monday. When Maria walked in, I turned the screen toward her. "What is this?" she asked, squinting at the clean, color-coded blocks of time. "This is your day," I said, "and this is tomorrow, and this is next week." I showed her how to click and drag an appointment if a client called to reschedule. I showed her how the system automatically blocked off time so nobody could double book. I showed her the database where Mrs. Gable's preference for extra towels was permanently recorded. She stared at the screen for a long time, then she looked at the paper notebook, which I had ceremoniously dropped in the trash bin. That morning, the phone rang. I typed the name in. The slot turned blue. A confirmation email fired off automatically. "Done," I said. By Wednesday, the difference was palpable. The lobby wasn't a holding pen for angry women anymore. The flow of people was steady, rhythmic. The reminders cut the no-show rate by half. On Friday afternoon, Maria called me to the back room. She handed me an envelope. Inside was my weekly pay, plus an extra $100 in cash. "This is not for lunch," she said, her voice serious. "Maria, I do not need—" "Take it," she interrupted. She leaned against the counter, looking at me with a respect I had never seen in her eyes before. "Listen to me, Daniela. You think you just organized a calendar. No, You gave us our sanity back." She pointed a finger at my chest. "If you do this for my friend who owns the bakery down the street, she will pay you. If you do this for my cousin with the landscaping trucks, he will pay you. We know how to work. Daniela, we do not know how to run the machine. People pay money to be safe. People pay money for peace." The phrase stuck in my head like a hook. People pay for peace. I went home that night, but I did not go to sleep. I opened a new browser window and started searching. I looked up salon management, small business operations, workflow automation. I realized that Everhaven was not unique. There were thousands of businesses just like them: nail salons, yoga studios, dog groomers, independent therapists. They were all drowning in paper and missed texts. They did not need a $10,000 enterprise software suite. They needed someone to come in, look at their mess, and build a raft out of the materials at hand. They needed a mechanic for their business processes. I spent the next month devouring information. I watched YouTube tutorials on no-code automation at 2x speed. I read forums on Reddit about operational efficiency. I learned how to link emails to spreadsheets, how to automate invoices, how to create digital waivers. I packaged these skills into mental bundles: the scheduling fix, the client database build, the auto reminder setup. I needed a name. I needed something that sounded professional, something that did not sound like a 19-year-old girl working out of her childhood bedroom. I sat with my notebook, the same way I used to sit in the living room while my parents filmed Lily. I thought about what my mother had always told me, the words she meant as a limitation, but which I was starting to see as a superpower. Be the anchor. She meant it as, be the heavy thing that stays at the bottom so the star can float. But that is not what an anchor is. An anchor is the only reason the ship does not smash against the rocks. An anchor is control. An anchor creates the stability that allows movement to happen safely. I wrote the word anchor on the page. Then I thought about the smooth, rhythmic movement of the schedule at the spa. Flow. Anchor Flow Ops. It sounded real. It sounded like a company that knew what it was doing. I stared at the name, tracing the letters with my pen. For the first time in my life, I wasn't building a foundation for Lily to stand on. I wasn't clearing the path for her entrance. I was building a structure that I owned. I was the architect, the engineer, and the CEO. I looked around my room, at the peeling paint, at the secondhand furniture. It didn't look like a corporate headquarters, but for the first time, it didn't feel like a cage either. It felt like a launch pad. I opened a new spreadsheet, row 1, column 1, Anchor Flow Operations, client list. I typed Everhaven Wellness Spa in the first slot. Then I took a deep breath and prepared to fill the rest of the rows. Anchor Flow Ops shifted rapidly from a side hustle to a legitimate income stream. It happened almost by accident, fueled by word of mouth in the immigrant small business community. Maria at the spa told her cousin who ran a landscaping crew, and he told a woman who managed a bakery. They all had the same problem. They were excellent at their craft, but drowning in the administration. I was charging small setup fees, usually between $200 and $300, plus a monthly retainer for maintenance. By the middle of my first semester at Franklin Valley College, I was bringing in between $700 and $900 a month. To a 19-year-old student living at home, that felt like winning the lottery every 30 days. But in the Jacobs household, money was never a private matter. It was a family resource, and the family had only one investment vehicle: Lily. My mother caught wind of my income when she saw me buying a new laptop charger, an $80 expense, without asking for permission. "You are doing well with your little computer project," she said one evening, leaning against the door frame of my room. Her tone was light, but her eyes were calculating. "It is going okay," I said, guarding the screen of my laptop. "Well, your father and I were talking," she continued. "Since you are making real money now, more than I make in a week. Actually, it is time you stepped up. We are raising the rent. We need $300 a month from you." "$300?" I asked. "Mom, I am already buying my own food and paying for my own gas." She shrugged. "Lily needs headshots, professional ones, not the ones I take in the backyard. The photographer charges $600. We have to pull together. Daniela, investing in Lily is investing in all of us. When she makes it big, nobody is going to worry about $300. I looked at her. I knew that arguing was useless. If I said no, they would just make my life miserable until I caved. Fine, I said, 300? But that conversation triggered a survival instinct I didn't know I had. The next day, I went to a bank across town, not the one my parents used, and opened a high-yield savings account. I opted for paperless statements only. I linked it to a new email address that nobody knew about. I paid them their $300, but every other cent I earned went directly into that secret account. It was the first time in my life I had kept a part of myself completely hidden from them. The dynamic in the house became even more twisted. My life split into two distinct time zones. During the day, I went to classes and worked at the spa. At night, from 10 in the evening until 2 or 3 in the morning. I built databases and automated email flows for my clients. I lived on caffeine and adrenaline. Meanwhile, Lily lived in a soft-focused dream world. She would sleep until 11, wake up to a breakfast of pancakes that my mother had left covered in the microwave, and spend her afternoons filming acting challenges for TikTok or trying on outfits for auditions that never seemed to materialize. I would be sitting at the kitchen table, eyes burning from staring at spreadsheets, while my father came in and shushed me because my typing was messing with Lily's concentration, while she watched Netflix in the next room. I thought I had reached the limit of what I could tolerate. I thought paying rent to support a sister who treated me like a servant was the bottom. I was wrong. The floor was about to drop out completely. It started with a letter. It looked innocent enough. Just a standard envelope from a private student loan servicer. I almost threw it away, thinking it was junk mail or a pre-approved offer, but something made me open it. The header read, "Important update regarding your loan disbursement." I scanned the page, confused. I had not taken out private loans. My tuition at the community college was covered by a Pell Grant and the small amount I paid out of pocket. Then I saw the number, $28,000. My stomach dropped so hard I felt nauseous. I read on. The loan was in my name, Daniela Jacobs, co-signed by Daniel Jacobs. I frantically logged onto the website listed on the letter. I had to reset the password because I had never created the account. When I finally got in, the dashboard was a horror show. There was the $28,000 student loan, but there was more. There was a notification for a career advancement line of credit with a limit of $12,000. It was maxed out. I clicked on the transaction history, my hands shaking so badly I could barely control the mouse. The money hadn't gone to Franklin Valley College. The $28,000 had been paid to the Starlet Academy, a non-accredited acting workshop in Los Angeles that offered a 6-week intensive course. The $12,000 on the credit line had been drained in a series of transactions: a short-term luxury apartment rental in West Hollywood, airline tickets, and a $5,000 charge for personal brand consulting. The dates matched perfectly with last summer, the summer Lily went to New York. Except she hadn't just gone to New York. She had done an online extension in LA afterwards. I sat there, frozen, $40,000 of debt, in my name, for a life I wasn't living. I printed every page. The printer sounded like a machine gun in the quiet house. I walked into the kitchen. My parents were eating dinner. Lily was texting on her phone. I slammed the stack of papers onto the table. The plates rattled. "What is this?" I asked. My voice was a whisper, but it felt like it was coming from the center of the earth. My father looked at the papers, then at me. He didn't look surprised. He looked annoyed that his meal was interrupted. My mother wiped her mouth with a napkin. "Oh, that," she said calmly. "We were going to tell you, eventually." "You forged my signature," I said. "You took out $40,000 in my name. That is a felony. That is identity theft." My mother stood up, her face flushing with indignation. "Watch your tone. Daniela, you are living under this roof. You have a credit score because we fed you and clothed you. That credit is a family resource." "It is fraud," I screamed. I finally screamed. You stole from me. We borrowed it, my father shouted back, slamming his hand on the table. Lily needed that course. The consultant said it was her big break. She needed to be in LA for the networking. We couldn't get approved for that much because of the mortgage. You had a clean slate. So you ruined mine? I asked, tears of rage pricking my eyes. You buried me in debt before I even graduated? Lily looked up from her phone. She rolled her eyes. God. Daniela, stop being so dramatic. It is an investment. When I book a series regular role, I will pay it off in like a week. You should be proud. Not everyone gets to say they sponsored a star. I looked at her. I looked at the three of them. There was absolutely no remorse, no guilt. In their twisted logic, I was the selfish one for complaining about being the fuel for their fire. I have two choices, I said, my voice trembling. I go to the police right now. I file a report for identity fraud. The loans get frozen. You go to jail. My mother laughed nervously. You wouldn't. We are your parents. Try me, I said. Or, I continued. The second option, I pay it. I accept this debt. But I am leaving, tonight, and I never give you another cent. Not for rent, not for groceries, not for Lily's eyelashes, nothing. My brain was racing. I had spoken to the lawyer client I was doing a database for last week. I remembered what she said about identity theft cases. If you report family, it gets messy. It takes years to clear your name. Your credit report gets flagged for fraud investigation. It freezes everything. I needed my credit. I needed it for anchor flow. If I had a fraud alert on my file, I couldn't get business banking tools. I couldn't sign contracts. Reporting them would save me the money, but it might kill my business just as it was starting to breathe. My parents exchanged a look. They knew me. They knew I was practical. They knew I wouldn't burn the house down with myself inside it. You are not going to call the police, my father scoffed. You do not have the guts. I am leaving, I said again. I turned around and walked to my room. I grabbed 2 duffel bags. I threw my clothes in. I packed my laptop, my chargers, my notebooks. I didn't fold anything. I just shoved it all in. My mother followed me to the doorway. You are overreacting, she said. You can't just leave. Who is going to help with the bills? Lily needs... I do not care what Lily needs. I whipped around to face her. Lily is 21 years old. Let her get a job. I zipped the bags. I grabbed my savings passbook from its hiding spot under the mattress. I walked past them in the living room. They were still sitting there, stunned that the appliance they called a daughter had finally unplugged itself. I drove to the apartment of Maya, a girl from my accounting class who had been looking for a roommate. I didn't even call first. I just showed up at her door, crying, with $40,000 of debt on my back and 2 duffel bags in my hands. She let me in. That night, lying on a sleeping bag on Maya's floor, I stared at the ceiling. The fear was overwhelming. $40,000. It was a mountain. It was an impossible number. But as the tears dried on my face, a cold, hard resolve replaced the panic. They thought they had trapped me. They thought that by saddling me with debt, they would force me to stay close, to work harder for them, to be the eternal safety net. They were wrong. I rolled over and grabbed my phone. I opened my banking app. I looked at the secret savings account. I had $2,000 in it. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I opened the loan portal. I set up an auto-pay plan. This is the last time, I whispered to the empty room. This is the transaction fee for my freedom. I will pay this debt. I will clear this ledger, but they will never, ever get a discount on my life again. I closed my eyes. The girl who wanted to be praised was dead. The businesswoman was awake, and she was ready to work. The next 6 years of my life were not a movie montage. There was no upbeat pop song playing in the background while I effortlessly transformed from a struggling student into a mogul. It was a grind. It was a slow, gritty, bone-deep exhaustion that settled into my marrow and stayed there. From the age of 19 to 25, my day was sliced into 3 distinct shifts of labor. At 5 in the morning, I was at a coffee shop downtown, wearing a green apron and smelling like burnt milk. That was for the rent and the groceries. It was mindless physical work that kept my hands busy while my brain woke up. By 1 in the afternoon, I was back at the apartment I shared with Maya, working as a remote virtual assistant for 3 different therapy practices. That was the sustainment money. It kept the lights on and the internet running. Then, from 7 in the evening until I passed out around 2 in the morning, I built Anchorflow Ops. This was the empire building. Anchorflow grew the way ivy grows, slowly at first, and then it was suddenly covering everything. It wasn't because I was a marketing genius. It was because the pain I was solving was universal. Maria at the spa told her cousin. Her cousin told a nail technician in Nashville. That technician knew a yoga instructor in Colorado. The message was always the same. There is a girl in Ohio who can make the chaos stop. I remember a Zoom call with a hair studio owner in Arizona. She was crying. She had excellent revenue, but her inventory was a disaster, and she had just missed payroll because her invoices were a mess. "I can fix this," I told her, my voice raspy from lack of sleep. "Give me your login for the bank and your supplier list. I will build you a dashboard." And I did, but I realized quickly that my trusty spreadsheets were not enough. I couldn't scale if I was manually entering data for 20 clients. I had to evolve. I taught myself no-code development. I stopped acting like a secretary and started acting like a product engineer. I found white-label software, generic platforms that I could customize and brand as my own. I connected payment processors to calendars. I built automated triggers so that when a client signed a contract, their invoice was generated, their welcome packet was sent, and their project folder was created without me clicking a single button. It wasn't flashy. It didn't have sleek animations or a cool logo, but it was robust. It worked. As the client list grew to 40, then 50, I realized I couldn't do it alone. I looked at Maya, my roommate. She was studying nursing, but she was the only person I knew who organized her sock drawer by fabric weight. "I need help." I told her over cheap takeout pizza one night. "I can pay you $15 an hour to handle the onboarding checklists." She took the job. Anchorflow Ops became us. Having her there meant I could sleep for 6 hours instead of 4. It was a luxury that felt decadent. Through all of this, my phone was a portal to a parallel universe where I was still the villain. My parents texted me regularly. They never asked how I was. They never asked if I had eaten or if I was safe. The messages were always press releases about Lily. Lily is in the final callbacks for a toothpaste commercial. My mother would write, "It is going to be huge." Or my father would send, "Don't forget who gave you your start. When you strike it rich with your computer thing, remember the family needs a new roof." And always, the guilt trips. "We are so tight this month. Lily's acting coach raised his rates. You should be helping. It is your duty." I never replied. I just opened my laptop and clicked on a file named Freedom Fund Tracking. It was the most painful and beautiful spreadsheet I had ever created. It listed the $42,000 of debt, the original principal plus the predatory interest that had accrued before I caught it. Every month, I transferred a chunk of money that made me physically wince. $600, $800. One month, after landing a big contract with a chain of Pilates studios, I transferred $2,000. I watched the number in the remaining balance column shrink. That money represented vacations I didn't take. It represented the nice clothes I didn't buy. It represented the nights out at bars with friends that I skipped to stay home and code. It was the price of my parents' betrayal, and I was paying it in installments of my own youth. But I found happiness in the margins. I found it in the quiet hum of the server working perfectly. I found it in the text messages from clients saying, "Daniela, for the first time in 5 years, I took a weekend off and the business didn't burn down. Thank you." I found it in the fact that every dollar I had left over was mine, truly mine. It took me 6 years. I was 25 years old. It was a Tuesday evening in November. I was sitting at my desk, the same secondhand desk I had dragged into the apartment when I was 19. I logged into the loan portal. The balance was $412.30. I had $5,000 in my checking account. My finger hovered over the Pay in Full button. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I clicked it. A loading circle spun for 3 seconds. Then, a green banner appeared across the top of the screen. Congratulations! Your loan is paid in full. The room was silent. Maya was out at her shift at the hospital. The traffic outside was a dull roar. I waited for the confetti. I waited for the sense of euphoria. But it didn't come. Instead, a wave of grief washed over me so powerful that I doubled over. I put my head on the desk and sobbed. I cried for the 19-year-old girl who had been handed a bill for a life she didn't get to live. I cried because I had done something incredible. I had climbed out of a $40,000 hole that my own family dug for me, and I had no one to call. I couldn't call my mother. I couldn't call my father. They would just ask why I hadn't sent that money to them instead. I was completely free, and I was completely alone. But the next morning, the sun came up, and the grief had hardened into something like armor. I was debt-free. Anchorflow was generating a steady, healthy profit. I was 25, and for the first time, my income didn't have a leak. I started saving aggressively. My father had told me once, while he was fixing a pipe under the sink, "You will never own anything. Daniela, you are a worker bee. You pay rent. People like us, we are lucky if we break even." I wanted to prove him wrong more than I wanted to breathe. I didn't look for a condo in the trendy part of town. I didn't look for a loft. I looked at the edges of Columbus, in the quiet neighborhoods where the trees were old and the houses were sturdy. I found it 6 months later. It was a small, one-story bungalow. It had white siding that needed a power wash and a porch that leaned slightly to the left. But it had a big backyard for a dog I didn't have yet, and a second bedroom that could be a real office, not just a corner of a bedroom. The price was $140,000. It was cheap because it needed work, and the market was soft. I had saved $80,000 in cash over the last year and a half of intense scaling. I took out a small, sensible mortgage for the rest, one that I could pay off in 3 years if I kept my pace. But the down payment? The closing costs? I wrote a cashier's check. The day I closed on the house, the realtor, a nice woman named Sarah, looked at the check and then at me. "You are young to be doing this with so much cash," she said, impressed. "Your parents must be very generous to help you out like this." I took the pen from her hand to sign the deed. The ink was black and permanent. "My parents didn't give me a dime," I said, looking her in the eye. "I earned every single penny of this." I signed my name, Daniela Jacobs. The signature was firm. It wasn't the shaky scrawl of the teenager who had been afraid to ask for a cupcake. That evening, I drove to the house. I didn't have any furniture yet. I just had my keys. I walked up the steps to the porch. The wood creaked under my boots, a sound that felt like a greeting. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the living room. The air smelled like dust and floor wax and possibility. The afternoon sun was streaming through the windows, casting long, golden rectangles on the hardwood floor. It was quiet. No television blaring about Lily's auditions, no lectures about my selfishness, no hidden debts ticking away in the dark. I stood in the center of the empty room and spun around slowly. "This is mine," I said aloud. I thought about the family resource logic my mother loved to preach. I thought about the future star my sister was supposed to be. Let them have their delusions. I thought, let them chase the spotlight. I had the bricks. I had the land. I had the deed. I walked out to the back porch and looked at the yard. It was overgrown, full of weeds and wild grass. It was a mess. It was perfect. I am going to plant a garden here, I decided, and I am going to build a fence, a high, sturdy fence. For the first time in my life, the walls around me weren't there to trap me in. They were there to keep the parasites out. Secrets in suburbia have a shelf life of about 45 minutes, especially when the carrier signal is Mrs. Green from across the street. I had barely unpacked my boxes when the news of my purchase hit the neighborhood grapevine. I imagine Mrs. Green saw the moving truck, looked up the property records online, because she is that kind of bored, and saw the sale price listed next to the words, cash sale. To a woman like her, that was not just gossip, it was a scandal. She must have called my mother immediately. I can hear her voice now, dripping with faux sweetness. "Oh, Karen, I just saw Daniela moving into that darling bungalow on Elm, and she bought it outright? You must be so proud of her success. I had no idea she was doing so well." For my mother, hearing that I was successful from a neighbor before hearing it from me was a double-edged sword. It validated her status as the mother of a wealthy child, but it humiliated her because she had no control over it. 3 days later, my phone rang. The screen flashed Mom. I stared at it, my thumb hovered over the decline button. I had not had a real conversation with her since the day I walked out with my duffel bag 6 years ago. We had exchanged texts, mostly her asking for money and me ignoring her, but this was a voice call. I answered. "Hello?" "Daniela." Her voice was high, breathless, and terrifyingly warm. It was the voice she used when she was trying to charm a receptionist into giving Lily a better audition slot. "Mrs. Green told me the news. A house, and paid for in cash? Oh, honey, your father and I are just over the moon." I leaned against my new kitchen counter, gripping the edge of the granite. "It is a fixer-upper. Mom, it is small." "Stop being so modest," she chided. "It is a milestone. Listen, we want to celebrate. It has been too long. We have been so busy with Lily's career, and I know you have been busy with your computer thing, but we are a family. Let's do brunch. Sunday, just us 4. Like old times." I hesitated. The rational part of my brain, the part that built Anchorflow Ops, screamed that this was a trap. It screamed that these people were emotional vampires who only showed up when they smelled fresh blood. But then, the other part of me spoke up. The 6-year-old girl who just wanted her mother to look at her art project. The teenager who wanted her father to say good job without following it up with, "But Lily did better." Maybe, I thought, maybe now that I am an adult, now that I have proven I do not need them, they will respect me. Maybe the dynamic has shifted. "Okay," I said, "Sunday." We met at a place called the Iron Fork downtown. It was one of those trendy spots where the menu is written on a chalkboard and the orange juice costs $9. I arrived 5 minutes early, dressed in a blazer and jeans. I felt solid. I felt professional. Then my family walked in. They looked like they were arriving at a movie premiere. My father was wearing a suit that was a little too tight around the shoulders. My mother was in a floral dress that was suspiciously color-coordinated with Lily. And Lily. My sister was 24 now, but she was dressed to look 19. She wore a pastel yellow sundress, oversized sunglasses, and a wide-brimmed hat that blocked the view of anyone sitting behind her. She glided through the restaurant, looking left and right to see if anyone recognized her. No one did. "Daniela," my mother shrieked, pulling me into a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. "Look at you. You look so corporate."
"Hi, Mom." "Hi, Dad." "Hi, Lily."
"Hey, sis," Lily said, lowering her sunglasses. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my generic handbag. Cute blazer, very boss babe. We sat down. The waiter came over, and my father ordered a bottle of champagne without looking at the price. "To the homeowner," he boomed, raising his glass. I clinked my glass against theirs. For the first 20 minutes, the conversation was almost normal. We talked about the weather. We talked about the traffic. My mother asked about the house. How many square feet? What the neighborhood was like. I felt a warmth spreading in my chest. It wasn't the champagne. It was hope. I thought, this is it. We are just having lunch. They are treating me like a peer. And then, the pivot happened. It was seamless, rehearsed, and brutal. "So," my mother said, setting down her fork, "the reason we are celebrating isn't just the house. It is a big week for the Jacobs family." She turned her eyes to Lily, beaming like a spotlight. Lily took a dramatic sip of her mimosa. "Well, I cannot say too much yet because of the non-disclosure agreements, but I had a meeting with a major casting director on Thursday. That is amazing, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What is the project? It is a streaming series, Lily said, waving her hand vaguely. A period drama. They are looking for a lead who has classical vulnerability. The director said I have the perfect face structure for the Victorian era. It is basically a done deal. They are just finalizing the funding. That is what we wanted to talk to you about. My father interrupted. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. This is the big one, Daniela. This is the break we have been investing in for 10 years. Once Lily gets this role, we are talking 7 figures. Red carpets, brand deals, the works. I nodded, cutting a piece of my omelet. I am happy for you. Lily, I hope you get it. My mother laughed, a tinkling sound that didn't reach her eyes. Oh, she will get it. But you know how these things are. You have to look the part to get the part. We need to upgrade her wardrobe for the screen tests. She needs a new vocal coach because the accent is specific, and the agency fees are due up front. I stopped chewing. I knew where this road went. I had walked it 1,000 times. I am not lending you money, I said. My voice was calm, but under the table. My hands were clenched into fists. My mother looked shocked. Lending? No. Honey, nobody is asking for a loan. We are celebrating. She took a sip of her drink and looked at me with a gaze that was terrifyingly benevolent. We were actually thinking about your house, she said. My house? I asked. Yes, she said. It was so smart of you to buy it now. Truly, it is a great asset. And honestly, it makes things so much easier. Easier for what? For the transition, she said, as if it were obvious. You know, Dad and I were talking. It is a shame that house is just sitting there with only you in it. It is a family asset. Really, you are holding it for the legacy. I felt the blood drain from my face. Holding it? Well, yes, she continued. Think about it. When Lily gets this role, she is going to be traveling a lot. She needs a home base that is private, somewhere away from the paparazzi. Your place is perfect. It is secluded. You can stay in the second bedroom, or maybe fix up the basement, and Lily can have the master suite. It would save us so much on rent, and you could support her day-to-day needs. You are so good at organizing. Daniela, you could be like her live-in manager. She smiled, waiting for me to agree, waiting for me to be grateful for the promotion from distant bank account to live-in servant. I looked at Lily. She was checking her reflection in a butter knife. You want me, I said slowly, to move into my own guest room, in the house I paid for, so Lily can live there for free? And you think I am just holding the deed for the family? Lily shrugged. Do not make it sound so transactional. Daniela, it is temporary, until I buy my mansion in Beverly Hills. Then you can come live in the pool house. My father nodded vigorously. It is the logical next step. You have the stability. Lily has the potential. You combine them, and we all win. I looked at them. I really looked at them. I saw the wrinkles around my mother's eyes, etched by years of anxiety and envy. I saw the grease stains that my father hadn't quite scrubbed out of his cuticles, despite the suit. I saw the hollowness in Lily's face, the terrified emptiness of a girl who had been told she was special so many times she never bothered to become competent. They were not monsters, they were parasites, and parasites do not hate the host. They just do not understand that the host has a right to live. I placed my napkin on the table. No, I said. The table went silent. Excuse me? My mother asked, her smile freezing in place. No, I repeated. I am not moving into the basement. Lily is not moving in. The house is not a family asset. It is my house. My name is on the deed. My money paid for it. And I am not giving you another cent. Not for vocal coaches. Not for wardrobes. My father's face turned a dark, ugly red. You ungrateful little... We sacrificed everything for you, my mother hissed, her voice dropping the sweet facade instantly. We let you live in our house for 18 years. We gave you the credit score you used to build that business. You think you did this alone? You stood on our shoulders. I stood on your debts, I corrected, and I paid them off. All $40,000 of them. We are even. I stood up. I pulled a $20 bill from my wallet and dropped it on the table. That is for my eggs, I said. Enjoy the champagne. I hope you can pay for it. I walked out of the restaurant. I didn't look back. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out, but my legs kept moving. I walked 3 blocks to my car, got in, and locked the doors. I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to cry. Part of me wanted to drive back and scream at them. But mostly, I just felt a cold, heavy clarity. I had hoped for an apology. I had hoped for love. Instead, I got a confirmation. They hadn't changed. They were never going to change. To them. I wasn't a person. I was a wallet that had finally learned how to walk. I drove home to my empty house. I walked into the living room and locked the deadbolt. I stood there, listening to the silence. It wasn't lonely anymore. It was safe. For the next 3 weeks, I heard nothing. No texts, no calls. I thought, perhaps foolishly, that my outburst in the restaurant had finally drawn a line they were afraid to cross. I thought they had given up. I threw myself into work. I signed 3 new clients. I planted hydrangeas in the front yard, digging into the earth with my bare hands until the dirt was wedged under my nails. It felt good to get dirty for something that was mine. Then came the Saturday. It was a beautiful morning. The sun was filtering through the new curtains I had sewn myself. I was drinking coffee and reading a book, enjoying the rare luxury of doing absolutely nothing. The doorbell rang. I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. A man was standing there. He was wearing a beige windbreaker and holding a thick manila envelope. He looked bored. I opened the door. "Can I help you?" "Daniela Jacobs?" he asked, looking at a clipboard. "Yes." He thrust the envelope toward me. "You have been served." He turned and walked away before I could even touch the paper. I stood on my porch, the envelope heavy in my hand. The morning sun suddenly felt cold. I looked at the cover sheet. Superior Court of Ohio, County of Franklin. Plaintiffs: Daniel Jacobs, Karen Jacobs, Lily Jacobs. Defendant: Daniela Jacobs. My hands started to shake. I ripped open the seal. I skimmed the first page, the legal jargon swimming before my eyes until certain phrases jumped out at me like physical blows. Breach of verbal contract. Misappropriation of family funds. Unjust enrichment. The defendant, Daniela Jacobs, utilized family resources, connections, and goodwill to establish the entity known as Anchor Flow Ops. Plaintiffs seek damages in the amount of $250,000 and a 40% equity stake in the company. They were suing me. My parents and my sister were suing me for the business I built while they were sleeping. They were suing me for the future I clawed out of the dirt with my own hands. I looked up at the street. Mrs. Green was watering her petunias, watching me. I walked back inside and closed the door. I didn't cry. The time for crying was over. I walked to the kitchen, placed the lawsuit on the counter next to my coffee, and picked up my phone. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call my father. I searched for business litigation attorney Columbus. They wanted a war? They wanted to claim that my life belonged to them? Fine. They were about to find out that the person who builds the system knows exactly how to take it apart. The legal papers were not just a lawsuit. They were a masterclass in creative fiction. I sat at my kitchen island, the granite cold against my forearms, dissecting the document paragraph by paragraph. My lawyer, Alana, had sent over a digital copy, but I needed to hold the physical weight of their delusion in my hands. The core of their argument was something they called the familial resource contribution. According to the filing, Anchor Flow Ops was not the result of my sleepless nights, my self-taught coding skills, or my obsessive operational management. No, according to Daniel and Karen Jacobs, my company was a collective family asset because I had established it while living under their roof. They listed the resources I had utilized to build my empire. The list included the family Wi-Fi connection, the electricity used to charge my laptop, the professional network of my mother, referring to the time she mentioned my name to one dentist 5 years ago, and, most galling of all, sustained emotional support and housing stability. They were suing for a 40% equity stake in Anchor Flow and $250,000 in backdated consulting fees. But the centerpiece of their evidence was Exhibit A. It was a screenshot of a text message exchange between Lily and me from 3 years ago. In the screenshot, Lily asked, "Will you help me make it to Hollywood?" My reply read, "I will help you as much as I can." That was it. That was the smoking gun. It looked like a binding verbal contract. I remembered that conversation vividly. I pulled up my own phone and scrolled back through years of archived messages until I found the original. The actual text I had sent was, "I will help you as much as I can, but not by destroying my own credit again. I can review your contracts, but I cannot pay your rent." They had cropped the sentence. They had surgically removed my boundaries to manufacture a promise I never made. I felt a dry, bitter laugh bubble up in my throat. It was almost impressive. They were gaslighting me legally. But the courtroom was only one front in this war. The real damage was happening on a battlefield where truth is irrelevant and emotion is currency. The internet. Lily went live on TikTok 2 days after I was served. She didn't name me. She didn't name Anchor Flow. She was too smart for a defamation suit. Instead, she played the storytime game. She sat in front of her ring light, wearing a sweatshirt that looked intentionally too big. Her hair in a messy bun. Tears glistening in her eyes. Tears that didn't smudge her mascara because she knew exactly how to cry for a camera. "I do not usually do this," she whispered to her 50,000 followers, "but I'm just so broken. Imagine finding out that the person you looked up to, the person you trusted to manage your career, was actually stealing your future." She spun a tale about a narcissistic older sister who was jealous of her talent. She claimed that this sister had used the family's life savings to start a business, promising that the profits would fund the family's artistic dreams, only to cut them off the moment she got rich. "She bought a house with cash," Lily said, her voice cracking perfectly on the last word. "While our parents are struggling to pay their mortgage, she stood on our shoulders to reach the top, and then she kicked the ladder down." The internet did what the internet does. It became a mob. The comment section exploded. "Drop the name. Sis. We ride at dawn. Older sisters are either angels or demons. There is no in-between. Eat the rich. Taking advantage of immigrant parents? Disgusting." It took less than 24 hours for the amateur sleuths to connect the dots. They found my LinkedIn. They found Anchor Flow Ops. They saw the last name Jacobs. Then came the review bombing. My Google business profile, which had maintained a perfect 5-star rating for 6 years, was suddenly flooded. 1 star. Owner is a scammer who steals from her family. 1 star. Terrible service. Highly unethical. Do not trust them with your data. 1 star. If she treats her own mother like trash, imagine how she will treat you. Yelp was worse. People who had never hired me, people who didn't even know what operations management was, were writing detailed essays about how rude and discriminatory my business was. My phone started ringing, not with sales leads, but with current clients. I picked up a call from Sarah, the owner of the Pilates studio chain. She was one of my biggest accounts. "Daniela," she said, her voice tight, "I am seeing some disturbing things online. People are tagging my business, asking why I associate with a thief." "Sarah, it is not true," I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "It is a personal family dispute that has spiraled out of control." "I like you, Daniela," she said, "but I cannot have this blowback. My brand is about wellness and positivity. If this doesn't go away, we have to pause the contract." I hung up, my hand shaking. But the final blow wasn't the comments or the clients. It was the bureaucracy. On Tuesday morning, I received 2 emails. One was from the state's Data Protection Authority. They had received an anonymous tip that Anchor Flow was mishandling client data and selling personal information to third parties without consent. They were opening a preliminary investigation. The second was from the IRS. A concerned citizen had reported irregularities in my tax filings, claiming I was hiding assets and underreporting income. I was being flagged for an audit. I sat in my office, surrounded by the silence of my empty house. The strategy was crystal clear. My parents and Lily knew they wouldn't win in court. The legal case was flimsy. The cropped text message wouldn't hold up once my lawyer subpoenaed the original phone records. They didn't want a verdict. They wanted a settlement. They were scorching the earth. They were choking off my revenue, destroying my reputation, and burying me in administrative nightmares until I broke. They wanted me to come to them, checkbook in hand, begging to pay them whatever they wanted just to make it stop. They were holding my life hostage, and the ransom was their future. I looked at the whiteboard on my wall where I mapped out client workflows. It was covered in red marker now, lists of clients who were on hold or concerned. I had two choices. I could pay them. I could cut a check for $250,000, give them the equity, and hope they went away. It would buy me peace. It would stop the reviews. Or I could fight. But fighting meant I couldn't do it alone anymore. I had to break the one rule I had lived by since I was 18. Never let the mess show. I called an emergency team meeting. My team was small. 7 people now. Maya was my operations manager. We had 2 developers, 3 account specialists, and a customer support lead. We met on Zoom because we were a remote company, but the tension transmitted clearly through the screens. They all looked tired. They had been fielding angry emails and deleting hateful comments for 3 days. They knew something was wrong, but they didn't know the whole story. I had told them it was a competitor smear campaign. I took a deep breath. I looked at their faces. These were people who relied on me for their rent, their groceries, their livelihoods. I owed them the truth. I need to tell you guys something, I began, and I need you to listen until the end. I told them everything. I told them about the star-child dynamic. I told them about the $40,000 of debt forged in my name. I told them about the 6 years of paying it off in secret. I showed them the uncropped text message. I told them about the house, the brunch, and the lawsuit. I didn't cry. I didn't use the shaky voice Lily used on TikTok. I spoke like a CEO giving a quarterly report. I laid out the facts, the data, and the timeline. This is not a competitor, I said, my voice steady. This is my family. They are trying to burn this company down because I refuse to let them live in my house for free. The IRS audit, the data investigation. It is all them. It is leverage. I looked at the camera lens, trying to make eye contact with each of them. I understand if this is too much. I said, I understand if you want to walk away. This is a lot of baggage for a job. If you want to resign, I will write you the best recommendation letter of your life and give you 2 months of severance. I waited. The silence on the call stretched for 10 seconds. It felt like 10 years. Then Maya unmuted herself. She looked furious, not at me, for me. Daniela, she said, her voice hard. I remember when you showed up at my door with those duffel bags. I remember you eating instant noodles for 3 years so you could pay off that loan. She looked at the other faces on the screen. I do not know about you guys, she said to the team, but I am not letting a failed actress and 2 grifters take down what we built. One of the developers, a quiet guy named David who usually kept his camera off, unmuted. My dad sued me over a car title once. David said, "Family can be the worst. I'm not going anywhere. Also, that data privacy claim is a joke. Our encryption is better than the bank's. I will compile the logs for the investigator tonight." The customer support lead spoke up. I will draft a template response for the reviews. We will flag them all as spam. We can fight the algorithm. One by one, they nodded. There was no hesitation, no judgment, just the calm, efficient resolve of people who solve problems for a living. I felt a lump form in my throat, tighter and more painful than any sob. I had spent my whole life believing that love was transactional, that you only got support if you paid for it or if you were the star. I was wrong. This was loyalty, and I hadn't bought it. I had earned it. Okay, I said. clearing my throat. Thank you. I straightened my spine. The cold, sick feeling in my stomach was gone, replaced by the familiar hum of operational focus. If they want a war, I said, let's give them a war. But we are not going to fight it on TikTok. We are going to fight it with documentation. I looked at Maya. Pull all the financial records from the last 6 years. I instructed. Every bank transfer, every loan payment, every email where my mother asked for money. I looked at David. Get me the IP logs. If they submitted those anonymous tips from their home Wi-Fi, I want to know. I looked at the rest of the team. Business as usual. We do not slow down. We do not hide. We are going to be so transparent, so professional, and so undeniable that they will look like exactly what they are. Children throwing a tantrum because the ATM stopped dispensing cash. I ended the call. I sat back in my chair. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. This could all go away. Daniela, just be reasonable. We are family. I looked at the message. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt like a surgeon looking at a tumor. I took a screenshot. I saved it to a folder named Evidence. I didn't reply. My reply would come later, and it would have a judge's signature on it. I hired Alana Pierce because her website didn't have a picture of a gavel or a pair of scales. It had a picture of a woman in a hard hat standing on a construction site, looking at blueprints. She specialized in small business defense, specifically for owners who built things with their hands and got sued by people who didn't. Her office was in a converted warehouse in the brewery district, smelling faintly of roasted coffee and old brick. I sat across from her, watching her read the lawsuit. She flipped the pages with a rhythm that suggested she had seen everything before, but every few minutes, she would pause and let out a sharp, incredulous breath. When she finished, she tossed the file onto her desk. It landed with a heavy thud. If this was a television script, she said, leaning back in her chair, the network would reject it for being too unrealistic. They are suing you for unjust enrichment because you used their Wi-Fi? That is a new one. Is it valid? I asked. Can they actually take 40% of my company because I charged my laptop in their kitchen? Alana shook her head. Legally? No, it is garbage. The arguments are thin. The precedents they are citing do not apply. And the concept of familial resource contribution, as equity is not a thing in the state of Ohio. If we go to trial, we win. I felt my shoulders drop an inch. But, Alana continued, holding up a finger, that is not the point. They know they won't win on the merits. This isn't a lawsuit. Daniela, it is a shakedown. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp. They are banking on the fact that litigation is expensive. They know that defending this will cost you $20,000 or $30,000 in legal fees. They know it will eat up your time. And most importantly, they know it will damage your reputation. They are using the court system to hold a gun to your head, hoping you will panic and write them a check for $50,000 just to make it go away. It is a classic attrition strategy. I looked at the file. I thought about my parents. I thought about the calculation involved, the cold, hard math of dragging their own daughter through the mud for a payout. So what do we do? I asked. Alana smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was a shark smile. We stop playing defense. We stop letting them control the narrative. You have been hiding this, right? You have been trying to keep the family drama quiet because you are embarrassed? Yes, I admitted. That ends today, Alana said. Silence is where they operate. It is their best weapon. If you want to keep your business, you have to drag this whole ugly mess into the sunlight. The next morning, I did the scariest thing I had ever done in my professional life. I sent a Zoom invitation to my top 50 clients. The subject line was, Important update regarding anchor flow operations. Transparency briefing. 42 people logged on. I saw the faces of the salon owners, the therapy practice managers, the studio directors. These were people who trusted me with their livelihoods. I could see the concern in their eyes. They had read the reviews. They had seen the TikToks. I sat in my home office, wearing a navy blue suit. My hands were trembling under the desk, but my voice was steady. Thank you for joining. I said, I know there have been rumors and disturbing allegations online. I asked you here to give you the truth, not the spin. I introduced Alana. She sat next to me, looking formidable. Anchor Flow is currently the subject of a lawsuit filed by Daniel, Karen, and Lily Jacobs, Alana explained, her voice cutting through the digital static. These individuals are Daniela's parents and sister. The allegations of data mismanagement and tax fraud are entirely baseless. They are retaliatory tactics stemming from a domestic financial dispute. Then, I put the documents on the screen. I didn't show them the emotional texts. I showed them the independent security audit we had rushed to complete over the weekend. It was from a top-tier cybersecurity firm. The result was in bold green letters. 0 vulnerabilities found. No evidence of data leakage. I showed them the letter from our CPA, certifying our tax compliance for the last 5 years. I am not a scammer, I said, looking directly into the camera lens. I am a woman who refused to let her family continue to exploit her finances. The people suing me are the same people who forged my signature on $40,000 of student loans when I was 18. I paused. The room was silent. I had broken the cardinal rule of business. Never air your dirty laundry. I built this company to be the anchor you can rely on. I said, I am fighting this because if I give in to them, I am no longer the person you can trust. I am asking you to judge me by my work, not by my last name. For a long moment, nobody spoke. I prepared myself for the disconnect tones. I prepared myself to watch the participant count drop to 0. Then, Sarah, the Pilates studio owner who had called me in a panic days earlier, unmuted her microphone. Daniela, she said slowly, my ex-husband tried to burn down my first studio when I left him. He told everyone I was embezzling. She looked at me through the screen, her expression fierce. If you have the guts to stand up to your own mother and father because they are toxic, then you are exactly the kind of person I want guarding my business. Anyone who can survive that can survive anything. I saw heads nodding in the grid of video feeds. Count me in, said the owner of the landscaping company in Tennessee. I do not care about TikTok. I care that my invoices get sent. You do good work. That is all that matters. We lost 3 clients that day. They were nervous, and I didn't blame them, but the other 39 stayed. And by the end of the week, 5 of them had referred new business to me. I had thought that exposing my shame would destroy me. Instead, it weaponized my integrity. But the real turning point happened in the discovery phase. Alana and her team were ruthless. They subpoenaed everything: emails, text logs, bank records, phone histories. My parents, arrogant and assuming I would settle, hadn't bothered to delete much. 2 weeks before the trial date, Alana called me to her office. She looked like she had just won the lottery. You need to see this, she said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. It was an email printout. The date was from 7 years ago, 3 months before I received the letter about the student loans. The email was from my father to my mother. Subject: Funding for Lily. Karen, I talked to the loan officer. We cannot get approved for the PLUS loan, but I was looking at Daniela's mail. She got a pre-approval for a credit line because she has no debt. If we use her info, we can get the money for the LA trip. She is just a kid. She won't notice for years. By the time she finds out, Lily will be famous and we can pay it off. It is better than her wasting that credit on community college books. I stared at the paper. The black ink seemed to vibrate. They hadn't just made a desperate mistake. They hadn't just borrowed it in a moment of panic. They had planned it. They had discussed it. They had decided, with cold calculation, that my financial future was a disposable resource to be harvested for Lily. Alana slid another document across. This one is even better, she said, or worse, depending on how you look at it. It was a form from the Secretary of State's Business Registration Division. It was dated 4 years ago. It was an application to amend the Articles of Organization for Anchor Flow Ops. It attempted to add Daniel Jacobs and Lily Jacobs as managing members with authorized signing power. It had been rejected by the clerk because the signature, my signature, didn't match the one on file. My father had tried to steal my company 4 years ago. He had tried to insert himself into the legal structure of my business so he could drain the accounts, and a diligent clerk at the state office was the only reason he failed. I never even knew. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to close my eyes. For years, a small, foolish part of me had held on to the idea that they loved me in their own broken way. I told myself they were just desperate dreamers who got carried away. But looking at these papers, the illusion shattered. This wasn't love. This wasn't even misguided ambition. This was predation. I was the gazelle, and they were the lions. And they were angry that I had dared to run away before they could finish the meal. "We have them," Alana said softly. "This proves premeditation. It proves malice. If we show this to a jury, they won't just dismiss the case. They might recommend criminal charges."
I looked up at her.
"Use it," I said. "Use all of it." The nights leading up to the trial were sleepless, but not because I was afraid. The fear had evaporated, replaced by a cold, crystalline anger. I stopped looking at the reviews. I stopped checking my mother's Facebook. I focused on the facts. I organized the evidence binders with the same obsession I used to organize my clients' databases. Every receipt, every transfer, every email was tabbed and color-coded. On the night before the trial, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my bedroom. I was wearing the outfit I had chosen for court, a charcoal gray suit, tailored to fit perfectly, a white silk blouse, minimal jewelry. I looked at my reflection. I tried to find the 19-year-old girl who had ridden her bike home in the freezing wind, crying because her parents wouldn't pay for her college. I tried to find the girl who had eaten ramen for 3 years to pay off a debt she didn't owe. She was gone. The woman in the mirror had tired eyes. Yes, she had lines of stress around her mouth, but she stood with her weight evenly distributed on both feet. She looked solid. She looked like an anchor. My phone buzzed on the dresser. I walked over and picked it up. It was a text from Lily. "It is not too late. Sis, just give us 20% and the consulting fee. We can call it off. Do you really want to humiliate Mom and Dad in public?" I looked at the message. I thought about the consulting fee. $250,000 for the privilege of being abused. I typed my reply. "See you in court." I turned off the phone. I turned off the lights. I lay down in the bed that I had paid for, in the house that was mine, and for the first time in months, I slept without dreaming. The Franklin County Court of Common Pleas smelled of furniture polish and stale anxiety. On the left side of the aisle, I sat alone with Alana. On the right, my family had arranged themselves into a tableau that looked like a casting call for a holiday movie about forgiveness. My father wore a sweater vest under his blazer. My mother had a silk scarf tied modestly around her neck. And Lily was a masterpiece of calculated vulnerability. She was wearing a soft beige cardigan that looked 2 sizes too big, making her appear smaller, more fragile. Her makeup was a work of art. There was a faint, reddish hue around her eyes, suggesting she had been weeping in the hallway just moments before. To a stranger, they looked like a wholesome, loving unit that had been shattered by a cold-hearted corporate daughter. The trial began, and the narrative they spun was suffocating. My mother, Karen, took the stand first. She didn't look at me. She looked at the judge, her eyes wide and earnest. We gave her everything. She testified, clutching a tissue. Daniela lived under our roof until she was 19. She used our electricity to charge her computer. She used the high-speed internet we paid for to build her website. She used my connections. I introduced her to her very first client at the dental office. She paused to dab her eyes. We never asked for rent back then because we thought we were investing in a family business. We thought Anchor Flow was for all of us. But the moment she started making real money, she cut us off. She forgot where she came from. She forgot who fed her. Then it was my father's turn. Daniel Jacobs sat in the witness box and reinvented history with a level of confidence that was almost hypnotic. His argument was twisted, a knot of logic so bizarre it made my head spin. He claimed that his neglect was actually a sophisticated parenting strategy. I was hard on Daniela. Yes, he admitted, leaning into the microphone. But that was the point. We put all our resources into Lily because she needed help. Daniela was strong. By denying her resources, I gave her the drive to succeed. I created the environment that forced her to become a businesswoman. He looked at the jury, nodding solemnly. Without the pressure I applied, she would be a receptionist right now. I built the fire that forged her, therefore, ethically. The result of that fire belongs to the family who lit the match. But Lily was the closer. When she took the stand, she didn't just testify. She performed. She spoke in a soft, trembling voice that forced the stenographer to lean forward. Daniela promised me, Lily whispered. She sent me texts saying she would help me. I turned down other job offers because I thought Anchor Flow was going to be my safety net. I thought we were partners. She looked directly at me then, and a single tear tracked perfectly down her cheek. She took the money that was supposed to launch my career. She said, her voice breaking, she used the family's credit capacity to pay off her own debts and buy a house for herself. She stole my future and turned it into her real estate. I could feel the energy in the room shifting. I saw the members of the jury looking at me, the woman in the sharp suit with the expensive lawyer, and then looking at the crying girl in the beige cardigan. The story of the ungrateful child who abandons her sacrificing parents is a powerful one. For a terrifying 20 minutes, I thought we were going to lose. Then, Alana Pierce stood up. She didn't look angry. She looked like a teacher who had just caught a student cheating on a test and was disappointed in their lack of creativity. She walked to the podium and connected her laptop to the courtroom's projector screen. Your Honor, she said, her voice crisp, the plaintiffs have told a very moving story about sacrifice and verbal contracts. Now, I would like to tell a story about mathematics and fraud. She clicked a button. Exhibit A appeared on the massive screen. It was the loan application for the $28,000 from 6 years ago. Can you please look at the signature on the bottom line? Alana asked my father. That is Daniela's signature, my father said, though he shifted in his seat. Alana clicked again. Next to the loan document, she displayed 3 other documents: my driver's license from that year, my community college registration form, and a check I had signed for rent. On the left, the signature on the loan was loopy, slanted, and had a heart over the I. On the right, my actual signature was jagged, sharp, and vertical. I am not a handwriting expert, Alana said, but does the signature on the loan look like the signature of the defendant? Or does it look remarkably like the handwriting of the co-applicant, Mrs. Karen Jacobs? My mother went pale. Before they could object, Alana moved on. Let us track the money, she said. A flowchart appeared. It showed the disbursement of $28,000 entering an account with my name on it, and then, within 4 hours, being wire transferred in its entirety to the Starlit Academy, Los Angeles. The remaining $12,000 from the credit line was itemized: West Hollywood Luxury Rentals, Delta Airlines, Sephora, Uber Eats. Alana turned to Lily. Ms. Jacobs, you testified that Daniela used family funds to buy her house. Can you explain how Daniela using her own income to pay off a $40,000 debt incurred by you constitutes her stealing your money? Lily stammered. Well, it is complicated. It was an investment. Alana didn't let up. She clicked to the next slide. This was the kill shot, the email we had found in Discovery. It was an email from Daniel Jacobs to his brother, my uncle, dated 5 years ago. The text was blown up to the size of a billboard. Don't worry about the credit line. Daniela has good scores. We used her info to get Lily to LA. She's just a kid. She is terrified of conflict. Even if she finds out, she won't dare sue her own parents. We will guilt trip her if we have to. The silence that fell over the courtroom was absolute. It was the sound of air leaving a balloon. I saw a juror in the front row, an older woman who had been looking at my parents with sympathy, cross her arms and glare at my father. My father's face turned a mottled purple. That was private correspondence, he sputtered. It is evidence of predatory intent, Alana corrected him. She wasn't done. We have heard a lot about how the Jacobs family chipped in to pay these debts. Alana said, I would like to call Mr. Timothy Vance from Chase Bank to the stand. Mr. Vance was a dry, boring man in a gray suit, and I loved him for it. He took the stand and confirmed, looking at his records, that every single payment made to the loan servicer for 6 years came from one source, a checking account solely in the name of Daniela Jacobs. Did you see any deposits from Daniel or Karen Jacobs into this account? Alana asked.
No, Mr. Vance said.
Did you see any transfers from Lily Jacobs?
No.
So, to be clear, the defendant paid off a loan she did not authorize, for money she did not spend, using income she earned herself? That appears to be the case. Alana thanked him and turned back to the plaintiffs. Lily had stopped crying. Her face was now hard, her eyes darting around the room, realizing the performance was crashing. One final exhibit. Your Honor, Alana said. She pulled up a spreadsheet. This file was recovered from an email Lily Jacobs sent to her previous attorney, who dropped her before this case was filed. The file is named AF Ownership Calc XLSX. The screen showed a spreadsheet. It wasn't one of my elegant, functional databases. It was a crude calculation of greed. Row 1 listed anchor flow. Estimated valuation, $1 million. Row 2, pain and suffering settlement goal, $250,000. Row 3, Lily's cut, 60%. Row 4, Mom and Dad's cut, 40%. And in the notes section, typed by Lily herself, if we settle for cash, I can finally buy the Range Rover. Alana let the image sit there for a long 10 seconds. This is not a lawsuit about family resources, Alana said, turning to the judge. This is a heist. The plaintiffs are not victims. They are conspirators who are upset that their victims stopped cooperating. She closed her laptop. The snap echoed in the room. Defense rests. The judge, a stern woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, looked over the top of her spectacles at my family. She looked at the parents who had claimed they forged me like steel. She looked at the sister who wanted a Range Rover. She didn't even call for a recess. She shuffled her papers, took a sip of water, and leaned into her microphone. I have sat on this bench for 15 years, she said, her voice low and dangerous. I have seen families fight over wills. I have seen divorces that would make a sailor blush, but I have rarely seen a misuse of the legal system as cynical and greedy as this.
My mother let out a small gasp.
Mr. and Mrs. Jacobs, she continued, you admitted to fraud in your own correspondence. You admitted to exploiting your daughter's credit, and you have the audacity to come into my courtroom and ask for a reward? She slammed her gavel down, not to end the session, but to punctuate her anger. Case dismissed with prejudice. She wasn't finished. Furthermore, I am finding the plaintiffs in contempt for filing a frivolous lawsuit. You have wasted the court's time, and you have attempted to weaponize the judicial process to harass the defendant. I am ordering the plaintiffs to pay 100% of the defendant's legal fees, effective immediately. I am also ordering you to pay all court costs. She turned her gaze to Alana. Counselor, if your client wishes to pursue countersuits for the original fraud regarding the loans, or for defamation regarding the online campaign, this court would be very inclined to hear them. The judge stood up. Get out of my courtroom, she said to my parents. I sat there, frozen. I watched the bailiff move toward my family. I watched my father try to argue, his face red, pointing a finger at me, shouting something about ungrateful children before his lawyer physically pulled him back. I watched Lily grab her purse and storm out, forgetting to limp, forgetting to cry, her heels clicking angrily on the marble floor. They were gone. The room was quiet again. Alana turned to me and smiled. It is over. Daniela, she said. I looked at the blank projector screen. I looked at the exit where my family had vanished. The narrative of the sacrificing parents and the selfish daughter was dead. It hadn't just been defeated. It had been exposed as a lie under the bright, unforgiving lights of the law. I stood up. My legs felt light. The weight I had been carrying since I was 9 years old. The weight of being the background child. The weight of the anchor. It was gone.
I shook Alana's hand. "Thank you," I said.
I picked up my bag. I didn't look back at the empty plaintiff's table. I walked down the center aisle, pushing open the heavy wooden doors, and stepped out into the hallway. I had walked in as a defendant. I was walking out as the owner of my own life. The hallway outside the courtroom was long, echoing, and flooded with the kind of harsh fluorescent light that makes everyone look tired. I was walking toward the elevators, the sound of my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the tile, when I heard the frantic scurrying of footsteps behind me. I did not have to turn around to know who it was. I knew that cadence. It was the sound of someone who was used to being chased, not the sound of someone who did the chasing. "Daniela, stop!" I stopped. I took a deep breath, adjusted the strap of my bag on my shoulder, and turned around. Lily was running toward me. Her mascara was running for real now. Not the artful smudge she had applied for the jury. Her face was flushed, and she looked younger than she had in years. Not the star ready for her close-up, but a terrified 24-year-old girl who had just watched her safety net catch fire. My parents were standing further back near the courtroom doors. My father was leaning against the wall, looking gray and defeated. My mother was weeping into a handkerchief, but nobody was comforting her. The lawyers were packing up their briefcases, indifferent to the family tragedy playing out in the corridor. "You are really going to do this?" Lily screamed, her voice echoing off the marble walls. "You are going to let them lose the house?" I looked at her calmly. I did not feel the spike of adrenaline that used to hit me whenever she raised her voice. I just felt a profound stillness. "I am not doing anything. Lily," I said. "The judge made a ruling." "They took out a second mortgage to pay for this lawsuit," she shouted, throwing her hands up. "They bet everything because we thought you would just settle. And now they have to pay your legal fees too? They will be bankrupt. Daniela, they will be on the street after everything they did for you?" There it was, the ancient, rusted logic of the Jacobs family, the idea that their sacrifice was natural, like gravity, but my sacrifice was a debt that could never be fully repaid. I stepped closer to her. "Lily, listen to me," I said, keeping my voice low. "They are not losing their house because I won. They are at risk of losing their house because they chose to sue the daughter who had already paid off $40,000 of their debt. They chose to gamble their home on the hope that I would be too scared to fight back." "But we are family," she wailed. "Family does not forge signatures," I said. "Family does not try to steal the business you built with your own hands. That is not family. That is a hostage situation. And I have paid the ransom for the last time." I turned back to the elevator. "You are heartless," she screamed at my back. "You are a monster." I pressed the down button. "No," I said, more to myself than to her. "I am just closed for business." I did not pay their legal fees. A younger version of me, the Daniela who desperately wanted to be good, might have written the check. She might have thought that being the bigger person meant cleaning up their mess one last time. But I realized that every time I saved them, I was not being kind. I was being an enabler. I was confirming their belief that actions do not have consequences, that money is magic, and that I was an endless resource. By refusing to help, I was finally giving them the dignity of owning their own lives. The fallout was swift and ugly. I heard through the grapevine that they had to sell the house where I grew up, the house where I was the shadow and Lily was the light. They downsized to a rental apartment in a different neighborhood. Mrs. Green and the other neighbors, who had once looked at the Jacobs family with envy, now whispered about the lawsuit and the public humiliation. The mask of the perfect family had slipped, and underneath, everyone saw the rot. I did not revel in their misfortune. I did not pop champagne. I simply watched it happen from a distance. The way you watch a storm on the Weather Channel. It was happening, but it was not happening to me. 2 years have passed since that day in court. Anchor Flow, Ops did not just survive the smear campaign, it thrived because of it. My transparency during the crisis became a part of our brand story. We now serve nearly 200 clients across 12 states. I have a team of 15 people. I have a director of operations, a head of tech, and a training manager. I am no longer the girl staying up until 3 in the morning inputting data. I am the CEO. I spend my days strategizing, mentoring my team, and building partnerships. I have moved from the engine room to the captain's chair. My house, the little bungalow on the edge of town, has changed too. I adopted a dog. His name is Cooper. He is a scruffy golden mix rescue with one ear that stands up and one that flops down. He does not care about my credit score. He does not care if I'm productive. He just wants to chase tennis balls in the backyard and sleep on my feet while I read. I have learned to enjoy the small, quiet things that I used to think were a waste of time. I cook dinner for my friends on Friday nights, not because I have to serve them, but because I want to feed them. I planted a vegetable garden in the backyard. I spent 3 weekends sanding and repainting the deck myself. Every time I fix something in this house, a leaky faucet, a squeaky hinge, I feel a surge of fierce pride. I do not need to ask permission. I do not need to wait for my father to tell me I am doing it wrong. I just do it. This life is mine. The paint on the walls, the food in the fridge, the peace in the air. I bought it all. My parents still text me occasionally. They never apologize. They send vague, circling messages like, "Thinking of you," or "Your aunt asks how you are." Lily still posts videos on social media. She has pivoted her brand to overcoming toxic family trauma, casting herself as the victim of a ruthless corporate sister. I do not reply. I do not watch the videos. I do not get angry. I simply press delete. It is not because I'm afraid of them anymore. It is because I am indifferent. My silence is not a wall I am hiding behind. It is a boundary I have drawn in permanent ink. I have started doing something else with my time, something that brings me more joy than any spreadsheet. I host free monthly workshops online. I call them the Foundation Builders. They are for people like me, the eldest daughters, the scapegoats, the responsible ones who were taught that their value lies in how much they can carry for others. I teach them how to budget. I teach them how to protect their credit. I teach them how to say no. Last week, I received an email from a 19-year-old girl in Texas. "Dear Daniela," she wrote, "my parents want me to take out a loan for my brother's business. They say it is my duty. Is it selfish if I want to keep my credit for myself? Is it selfish if I want to live my own life, not the one they wrote for me?" I sat on my back porch, watching Cooper chase a firefly in the twilight, and I typed my reply. No. I wrote, "It is not selfish. It is survival. It is sanity. It is healthy. You are allowed to be the main character of your own story, not just a supporting actor in theirs." I hit send. I stood up and walked to the edge of the porch. It was a warm summer evening. The string lights I had hung myself were glowing softly above the garden, casting a warm golden light over the tomato plants and the hydrangeas. I picked up the hose and began to water the plants. The water hissed softly, smelling of rain and earth. I thought about the girl I was at 18, scared, indebted, convinced that I was invisible. I thought about the girl who rode her bike in the freezing wind, whispering, "I am going to own the theater." I looked around my yard. This was my theater. There was no applause here. There were no viral videos. There was just the sound of the crickets, the dripping water, and the steady, rhythmic beating of my own heart. I realized then that I had spent my whole life being told that my existence was only justified if I was fueling someone else's dream. But the truth was simpler and far more beautiful. I had the right to build a dream for myself. I had the right to protect it. And I had the right to stand in the center of it, under my own lights, and finally be seen. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey from that chaotic spa to this quiet garden, and I am grateful you walked it with me. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while working in a busy office in New York? Or maybe relaxing in a quiet room in London? Please comment down below and let me know your location and what you thought of Daniela's decision. If this story resonated with you, Please subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and if you really want to support us, hit that hype button so we can share more stories of resilience and justice with people who need to hear them. Stay strong, and remember, you are the anchor of your own life.